thank you again for coming to my presentation. Hopefully this is something a little bit unique that you all haven't seen before. I know I've been playing around with it in my lab environment, and really I emphasize lab environment because what I'm going to show you guys, you probably shouldn't do it in a production environment, but you should kind of get an idea of kind of the point of it, and maybe you're looking at doing it in your own environment. Maybe you already have it set up. Maybe I'm doing something different that you're not doing. So just to get started, a little bit about me. I hold a BS degree in Management Information Systems. It's just a hybrid business IT degree. Started at the age of 17, just interning, doing the normal stuff that most people do, floating through different positions. Currently, my main focus is Active Directory security and Microsoft client server system hardening, as well as Office 365 and Azure Cloud Security. Although after looking at Serbo's talk yesterday, I may have to kick that out because that was an amazing talk on Microsoft Flow. So I spent the past 7 years donating my time for a nonprofit, and I managed to get them on Azure, and that's really kind of where I picked up a lot of cloud-based security training, because obviously stuff in that landscape isn't free. So if you do get an opportunity to donate your time, it's well worth it. It has a lot of intangible benefits. My slide deck content is all on GitHub. So my Twitter handle is RootsecDev. So you can go to the virtual smart cards repository and you can download my slide decks. You can download the video presentations, because I have a lot of interactive demos. So I'm going to try and not bore you to death with a bunch of slide decks. So the main purpose of this is passwords, and I think in any environment, people want to get past passwords, and you have a lot of stumbling blocks, and this to me is perfect sense, because we have end users that do really dumb things with passwords. So that's what this talk in a nutshell is about. So another thing that's changed in kind of the password landscape, if you don't follow it, when Microsoft released Windows 10 1903, they came out with some very radical different password guidance. They basically, if you look at this, and hopefully it's clear enough, if not, download my slide decks. They got rid of password expirations, and that was very controversial. A lot of people had just kind of thought that everyone was used to changing passwords. And for me, when you set 30, 45, 90 days, some people have a really hard time picking and choosing secure passwords. So this is kind of working in tandem with some of those new policy capabilities that Microsoft has kind of come out with. So another thing to think about, if you're doing more advanced stuff like ESA admin forest, you got to think about isolated identities. So, smart card technology is really nothing new, but at the same time, you even out in those areas, you don't want people to use passwords, especially if you have a forest trust and you have all your admins in a different forest and you're segregating your two environments. So with that being said, whenever you don't have those options, Windows 10 Hello for Business isn't an option, and you want to use MFA, smart cards is the way to go. And when you're doing all this stuff, and you set this for the first time, and this is nothing new, you go into the account properties of a privileged user, and you right-click on that box that says, hey, smart card is required for interactive logon. Some things happen. Traditionally in the past, you get a 120-character random value. The password hash never changes. So hopefully as people are moving beyond Windows 2008 since that is coming up end of life very, very soon. It's going to get here before we know it. And people are migrating systems. We're going to be, everyone's going to be in the same boat when you start migrating 2012 R2 systems. And so you start thinking about domain controllers and where you need to go and where you need to get to. And this has always been a problem with smart cards because they were very, very vulnerable to pass the hash attacks if you aren't doing things correctly with segregating your admin workstations. So enter in 2016 for us. So there's a tribute here. It's basically expire passwords on smart card only accounts. This is only available in Server 2016 Forest. You have to be at a Forest functional and domain functional level in Server 2016 Forest. So if you upgrade Active Directory, it's definitely not on by default. So you're probably going to want to check mark that box whenever you put it up to allow NTLM secrets to automatically rotate in accordance with whatever your password policies are. So then that gets a little bit more fun because then you can start looking at other things like fine-grained password policies. Hey, I got somebody with a hardware token, and I don't care when they use it, how they use it, what day they use it, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set my 120 character value, and I'm going to tell that password hash to rotate every 2 days. Sounds crazy, but once we get past where we're using hardware-based tokens or passwordless solutions, this will start making more sense. And later on my slide decks, you'll kind of see the ubiquity of this across other systems than besides just Active Directory for us. So there's 4, and I'm sorry that the one got cut off the top. The one at the top is deny access to computer from the network. So basically what these are just templates, and outside your privileged access workstations, you should really be adding this to both your member server and client server landscape. It's going to get your domain and enterprise admins if any of those users exist. So they're only going to be able to log into certain places. So you want them to jump from a privileged admin box to domain controllers or any other jump box where they may have to triage Active Directory or maintain it. And you don't want those users jumping to other systems, especially when those systems are getting connected to the internet, which leads to this. So pass the hash is a problem. And that's why I said on this previous slide deck, these settings are very important. If you download the DISA stigs and just even look at the reports, these are there. So they're pretty, they're very understanding with, hey, here's the groups that you really need to put in these, because even with Microsoft guidance, this is not defaulted in there. So just a couple warnings, just some disclaimers. That's why I put that this is a lab environment. Hopefully, like many of you with what I do, I have a lab. I like to play around with stuff. I like to break stuff down. I like to get into Metasploit and get into that area because it really helps me understand what I'm doing on the Active Directory side, especially whenever it comes to the fact of securing your users. So deploying an enterprise root CA role to a domain controller could lead to a resume generating an event. I don't suggest that at all. But that's why I do it in my lab, to kind of conserve space, to reduce memory footprint. And PKI can be complex to roll out. So I have 30 minutes to do this. So we're just going to do a 1-tier ADCS environment. Don't recommend it. Another thing, VSCs will be depreciated. There's no set date, so you can go in, you can download the latest Windows 10 build, and I'll show you later on how to do this. But the whole point of this is, if you don't have physical hardware gear, you can still provision out smart cards to an environment with a virtualized TPM chip. So this is just a low-cost way of deployment. The bright side is a lot of what I'm going to show you here is applicable to YubiKey 5s. So that landscape is growing between personal, professional type of logins. Google Advanced the Google Advanced Management Program. You sign in with YubiKeys there. Azure's in preview, so this can kind of extend well beyond that realm. So if I get time, I will show you how to do that. If I'm out of time, please download the slide decks and the demo content. You'll see how I'm doing some of that stuff. So obviously the path forward is Windows 10 Hello for Business. Microsoft is recommending to go that route, but I'm not discussing any of that today. This is really if you're a non-Office 365 Azure customer, or maybe you're using Enterprise Security Administrative Forest for isolated identities, then Smart Card is still the path to take. So just a couple of prerequisites here. This works on not only Hyper-V Workstation, it also works on VMware Workstation. I crossed out a few things because this is normally how I would deploy an Active Directory Certificate Services environment. I'd have an offline root CA, an enterprise sub CA, and then an online enterprise CA. It's very important if you're doing this beyond a lab to have an offline root CA. It's going to prevent any type of compromise, or at least it's going to be a lot harder to compromise root certificate authority whenever it's completely offline, desegregated from your network. And then we're going to have a Windows 10 1903 client with the virtual TPM enabled. So along with that, I don't disable IPv6. There's actually some Microsoft guidance on what they prefer you to do, which is there's a registry key to prefer IPv4 over IPv6. And I'm going to use sconfig to set a static IP. I'm going to install ADDS and confirm my domain controller's running. And I'm just going to give you a very quick demo of a dirty way to set up your own domain controller using nothing but server core. There. Okay, default server and core. I'm getting into sconfig. Sconfig is your friend because it gives you tons of menu options. I already have some IP addresses in here because I have a pfSense firewall set up. So I'm going to go ahead and static IP this guy, plug in my gateway to my pfSense firewall. Then you're going to notice here on my DNS server, I'm going to go ahead and just do 2.2. So that's set, that's done. We're off and running. We have it static IP'd. And then next what we're going to do here is we're going to get into PowerShell. And if you ever set up a server core with Active Directory, this is basically how you do it. And you can automate it with scripts. So you can get Windows feature, AD domain services, and install. Install Windows feature. So this is going to download all the modules. And I'm going to go a little bit further. So it's installed. And next we're going to import all the modules. Go a little bit further because I'm worried about time here. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to install our ADDS Forest. This is brand new Forest, so I'm just going to call it SecLab. Going to give my safe mode administrator password. And then pretty much at this point, the Forest is going to go off and it's going to run. It's going to start installing. So that in a nutshell, once it reboots, you should be good. If for some reason this is your first domain controller, and after you reboot, you may want to run git net connection profile and unplug your NIC and replug it back in because your firewall rules may be messed up. It may switch over to public since it's the first one. So that's really kind of it on basically setting up your first domain controller. You see here I'm running actually a reg script to prefer IPv4 over IPv6. So that's all done. We have our first domain controller set up. So next, I'm going to get on my Windows 10 device, and on I believe it's 1809 and above, you have to go into optional features and download the RSAT tools that way. So I'm going to download all the tools that I need to get this rolling. So next, I'm going to install ADCS on my domain controller. So got another little short presentation on that. So here what we're doing, we are putting our credentials in. We're going to hit OK here. Because it's run server core only, I have to connect to it remotely through Server Manager. So we're doing that. So it's going to look and make sure I have valid enterprise admin credentials. So I'm going to select my certificate authority. And then next, I'm just going to do an online enterprise root CA. So then I'm going to get to my private key options. And right here, you're going to notice I'm going to select a SHA-256 hash, and I'm going to get into that a little bit further because people have a tendency to go exotic or extreme, or they want to make sure that they are securing that root CA in a way that they're not going to have to touch it for years. And I'm going to explain a little pitfall with that because I think some people run into it. So kind of at that point, ADCS is installed. It's ready to go. There are 4 MMC tools that I always collapse in and use. So I'll put in the enterprise PKI, the certificate template, the certificates that point to the domain controller, and the certificate authority that points to the domain controller. So now that I got all that stuff, I'm going to tell you right now that ADCS is going to have issues. Microsoft. So whenever you open up that enterprise PKI, you're going to see some like red X's, and you're going to think, what the hell is going on? So run a GP update /force, refresh it, it'll fix it. And the reason being is once you deploy that first online enterprise CA, if you get into the properties of your enterprise PK manage AD containers, you're going to notice that what you just deployed is actually in the certificate authorities container, but you need to let policy take hold of all your machines so that that root CA just gets rolled out. So that's why you have to do that. Not a big deal. Issue number 2. So because we've rolled this out onto a domain controller, we have a domain controller certificate. That certificate does not support Kerberos authentication, and it does not support smart cards. So we're out of the box. We're going to have problems. And this is on like a server 2019 domain controller. So this pretty much is what happens by default. So whenever you get in and look at the templates, there are like 3 different domain controller templates. And the first time I was ever even exposed to ADCS, I'm like, which one do I use? So use Kerberos authentication. If you are on 2008 and above, you should be using Kerberos authentication. So Kerberos authentication supports smart cards also. So that's going to set up your KDC. So use Kerberos authentication. Kick the other ones out. You do not need them. That's explained in this blog URL on why you want to do that. So another one on, hey, how do we do all that? How do we perform all these fixes and get this set up to where it really should be going? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let me go into my video and get that. That'll probably be much helpful. So right here, I'm looking at my certificate templates. I see my domain controller template. I'm going to dump it. It's not needed. So I'm going to get rid of domain controller authentication, which is really not needed either for this. So then I'm going to get into my certificate templates. and I'm going to go to Kerberos authentication, and I'm going to go back to my certificate templates. I'm going to click on New. I want to issue that certificate template to my domain controller. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It's there. I just left the defaults the way that the template was created. You're going to notice here, like if I refresh, you're going to see my original domain controller template in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to kill that. So you kind of see it right there. There we go. Okay, it's dead. Since we're running server core, I'm going to use get certificate. I'm just going to PowerShell remote into the domain controller. I'm going to issue my Kerberos authentication certificate. From that point, I refresh. It's in there. You should not have to reboot the domain controller. That should be a transient change. So at this point, I at least got a basis infrastructure to setting up smart cards. So next, what we're going to do here. And I got that listed in my slide here too, so whenever you download it, you'll see what I issued, so you can do it in your lab. And then also, anything that was issued out with that domain controller template, get into your issued certificates on your certificate authority and pop it out, revoke it, do a cease of operations. So some people, depending on what landscape you're in, whether you're working for the DoD, any type of critical infrastructure, there's a doc, there's from the CNS website that's like NSA guidance on encryption keys to use. This is kind of a doc that they released a few years ago for post-quantum cryptography. And some ADS/CS people will actually see this and they'll be like, oh, I want to go ahead and choose something really strong. I want to protect myself from the NSA. I'm going to use the SHA-512 hash. And, some people, unfortunately, have this mentality of where they want to use the exotic crypto. Please don't. You're going to find that it's incompatible with gear and stuff that you want to sign. And people are doing it. They ask, like, hey, I'm trying to establish a TLS-1.2 connection with Active Directory server using SHA-512 certificates. It's not working. Here's why. So whenever I hit my domain controller over 636 with an Nmap scan, I get all the different ciphers from 1.0 through 1.2. And you'll probably know something interesting there that it supports 3DES, Suite 32 attacks. So if you're into like compliance and scanning, that type of thing, you may want to pop that out, or your information security guys may get mad at you. There's no practical attacks for Suite 32, but disable it anyway. The reason why I'm harping on LDAP is whenever you set up a one-tiered ADCS forest, it relies on LDAP. So that's why I'm picking on LDAP. You do something like SHA-512, nothing's going to work. You're going to have problems. So I officially started to hate LDAP. Really, in a hierarchy, you should probably do like you should probably set your online responders for revocation to like a web server. So next, I'm just going to get into the meat of provisioning a virtual smart card. So on my host, I don't have a TPM. You kind of see that in the PowerShell window. In Hyper-V, you can check mark a box that says, hey, I want to enable trusted platform module support. So you can do that. You can do that with VMware. If you do it with VMware, you got to encrypt it first, and then you can pop out a virtual TPM chip. So you don't even need to do it. So in the essence of time, I'm going to talk about TPM Service Manager. That's how to provision virtual smart cards. Yep, 10 minutes, so good timing. So what I'm going to do a demo on how to provision that, how to provision your first virtual smart card and get logged in. And make sure that I get that out. So right here, what you're seeing is I'm going through my certificate template, I'm duplicating the smart card logon certificate template. And if you, my previous slide, if you look at the URL, it goes like how to actually provision these settings. So I'm just going to call it TPM virtual smart card logon. I'm just going to set it to 2 years. I'm going to set my request handling over to signature and smart card logon. Going to hit OK. So here's kind of the rub with virtual smart cards. You still have to use RSA 2048. Completely fine. Just make sure that you use the Microsoft smart card based crypto provider. Otherwise, this will not work. And those are in the Microsoft instructions. I'm just going to provision, like give a couple users access to enroll. Luke Skywalker's my domain admins. You can set the enroll capability for authenticated users if you want to do that whole thing. So that's all good. So kind of after that point, I'm getting into my certificate authority, and I'm going to issue that TPM virtual smart card logon template. So there, it's issued. So now at this point, I'm going into TPM Service Manager. I'm just going to give it a name called VSC. I'm going to tell it to prompt for a PIN code, so I can do a PIN code of my choosing. The admin key, I'm just doing a random generated one because this is a non-managed environment. I can destroy it. I don't care about managing it, so I'm creating a random one. So this is going to happen at least for the next minute or so. Once it's done, we got our first virtual smart card created. So next, what do we do with that? Well, we're going to get into an MMC console. And we're going to get into my user accounts and certificates. And this is kind of the manual way you can set up to auto-enroll. But anyway, so I'm going to go to All Tasks, Request New Certificate. I'm going to go head in. I'm going to select my Active Directory enrollment policy. I'm going to choose my TPM virtual smart card logon. It's going to prompt me for a PIN just like a physical smart card would. And then I'm going to click on OK. It's enrolling. Okay, you want to see the succeeded sign. That means that inside our personal certificate store now, we have a certificate that is tied to that virtual smart card. So kind of at this point, I'm going to log out and I'm going to test that. So I'm going to go over to the little chip-looking icon. It's going to say security device. I'm going to log in with the PIN that I assigned it. And from that point, we will be back into Windows here in just the next few seconds. Okay, we're in. So at this point, I know that it's working. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check mark that box that says, hey, smart card is required for interactive login. I'm going to confirm that that attribute that I talked about earlier is on. So that tells me that, hey, now that I've checkmarked that box, that's going to adhere to a password policy. So then at this point, I'm going to create a security group. I'm going to call it Smart Card Users. I'm going to put my Luke Skywalker ID in there. There we go. Okay, he's in there. Kind of like, what does that do? So next I'm going to open up Active Directory Administration Center and get into my password settings container. I'm going to make sure that that checkbox is on. It is. So that's good. I'm going to create a new fine-grained password policy. And I'm going to set it to that stuff that I said I was going to set to. It's going to be 120 character value. It has to live a day, rotates every 2 days. So user logs in. They don't need to worry about changing their password. They just log in with their PIN each day, wherever they're segregated to. So I set it the precedence of 1, so that will process for that security group, even if you have just no password policies for anybody else. So real quickly, I think, am I still good on time? 5? Okay, perfect. So I got a couple reference links here, password strategies, test lab guides, how to set up an ADCS hierarchy, two-tier hierarchy. It's very important to download at least at minimum Microsoft security baselines and secure your domain controllers with them, your workstations, and kind of go from there. And then, of course, there's securing privileged identity access box. That'll give you more ingrained details if you want to get to that level about how to set up pause. So next, I just want to talk briefly about YubiKeys.